When you think about Congress, you probably picture a split-screen television.
Oh, definitely.
Like, on one side, there's this loud, explosive action movie playing on a loop. Dramatic speeches, bitter partisan gridlock, and the kind of explosive headlines that completely dominate your social media feeds.
Right, the stuff that gets all the clicks.
Exactly. But if you look at the other side of the screen, there's a quiet, incredibly detailed documentary playing. One where people are, meticulously building a bridge, brick by brick, entirely under the radar. So welcome to Congress in Context, a special deep dive into the legislative machinery of our government.
And we get so distracted by the explosions on that first screen that we completely miss the structural engineering happening right under our noses on the second. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources we're digging into today offer a masterclass in how this machinery actually functions.
Yeah, they really do.
Underneath the daily noise, there's this quiet, ongoing engine of legislating that dictates the realities of everyday life for all of us.
Exactly. Our mission for today's deep dive is to sift through the congressional record for Tuesday, June 16th, 2026. We've got the floor transcripts, committee actions, and a massive stack of recently introduced bills.
It's a huge stack.
It really is. And we're going to bypass the spin and show you exactly what your representatives are doing all day, because the tension of this particular Tuesday perfectly captures that split screen. We saw overwhelming bipartisan unity on a massive housing reform package.
Which are rare these days.
Super rare. And that collided head-on with some of the most bitter partisan gridlock over foreign wars and the Department of Justice.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, really.
It is. But hey, before we pull back the curtain on those floor debates, just a quick housekeeping note. This is a completely independent project. We don't run ads, and we aren't backed by any corporate sponsors.
Right, no corporate overlords here.
Exactly. So if you find value in this kind of ad-free civic education, you can support the production infrastructure directly by using the Buy Me a Coffee link located in your app's show notes.
Yeah, your support literally keeps the servers running and the microphones on. We really appreciate everyone who chips in.
We really do. So let's start with the bridge building side of the screen. The biggest legislative highlight of the day was H.R. 6644.
The 21st Century Road to Housing Act.
Right. And this bill passed a crucial procedural motion with a staggering 87-8 vote, which getting 87 senators to agree on what day of the week it is feels like a miracle right now.
Let alone passing comprehensive housing reform.
Exactly.
But to understand why that 87-8 margin matters, we need to look at the mechanism of that vote, because this wasn't the final passage of the bill. It was a cloture vote.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Yeah.
because cloture sounds like a medical condition.
It really does. But in the Senate, any single member can technically stall a bill forever by just refusing to stop debating it. That's the same as filibuster.
Right.
So cloture is the procedural tool to forcefully cut off that debate and move to a vital vote. But invoking cloture requires a supermajority of 60 votes.
So hitting 87 votes means the support wasn't just bipartisan, it was overwhelming enough to completely steamroll any attempt by the fringes to kill the bill.
Precisely.
And looking at the text of H.R. 6644, you can sort of see why it built that coalition. It tackles zoning laws, sets guidelines for reducing parking minimums, and aggressively promotes transit-oriented development.
Right. Eliminating those restrictions on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, is a big part of it, too.
Oh, huge. But the cornerstone of the bill, and really what dominated the floor speeches, is how it targets private equity. It takes unprecedented steps to stop massive corporate firms from buying up single-family homes.
Yeah, that was wild to see. Both Democrats and Republicans were on the floor explicitly stating we need to get homes back into the hands of families, not hedge funds.
But ask yourself why this specific issue bridged the divide so cleanly.
It's the universal nature of the pain, honestly. The average age of a first-time homebuyer has jumped from 31 a decade ago to 40 today. And rent is soaring. It doesn't matter if a senator represents a dense urban district in New York or, a sprawling rural county in Wyoming. Their constituents are screaming about housing costs.
The political calculus shifted because the crisis is just everywhere.
Exactly.
But I get that the crisis is universal. Nobody gets exactly what they want in a bill this massive, though. How do they actually hammer out the details without the whole thing collapsing over, one controversial zoning clause?
Well, that's the messy reality of legislating. You heard floor leaders from completely opposite ends of the political spectrum openly admitting they hated parts of this bill.
Right, they really didn't hold back.
Not at all. But they voted for cloture anyway because the alternative was doing nothing while the housing market burns.
That dynamic actually brings up a completely different floor debate from the same day regarding, of all things, college sports.
Ah, yes. S4 177.
Right, the Student Athlete Act of 2026. Think about the Senate's 60-vote threshold, like a massive group of friends trying to pick a restaurant for dinner.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If one person absolutely demands sushi and refuses to compromise, the whole group goes hungry. You need 60% of the group to agree on pizza. Nobody gets their perfect ideal meal, but everybody gets fed.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it, actually, because on the floor, we saw a senator try to force a vote on a competing sports bill, essentially demanding their version of sushi.
Right.
But another senator stepped in and objected, explaining the sheer physical toll of actual legislating. They noted that their committee had spent 3 years sitting in a conference room for 6 to 8 hours a day, negotiating S4177 so it could actually clear that 60-vote threshold.
3 years in a conference room for a college sports bill? That sounds agonizing. I mean, why not just force a vote on the purest version of the bill to show your voters where you stand?
Because a messaging bill that gets 59 votes and dies doesn't actually change the law. If you really want to regulate the chaos of college athletics, you have to make concessions that will infuriate your base.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You give up ground on liability protections, the other side gives up ground on revenue sharing. You endure the conference room because you actually want to get the pizza.
All right, so that's the quiet documentary side of the screen where compromise actually happens. But let's flip the channel to the action movie. Because foreign policy and the judiciary saw some incredibly bitter partisan gridlock.
Yeah, a very different vibe.
Totally. Let's pivot to SJR's 172. This was a war powers resolution directing the removal of United States armed forces from hostilities in Iran. And the vote failed by the narrowest of margins, 47 to 48.
It's important to look at the mechanism here, too.
Yeah.
Because this was a vote to discharge the resolution.
Right, a discharge petition.
Exactly. When a committee chair refuses to bring a bill up for a vote because they want to bury it, lawmakers can use a discharge petition to yank the bill out of the committee's hands and force it directly onto the floor.
Which is pretty rare, right?
It's a hostile maneuver, yeah. And it shows how deeply fractured the chamber is on this specific issue.
And the arguments on the floor reflected that fracture perfectly. I mean, let's lay out the two distinct realities presented in the chamber. The perspective driving this discharge petition was that the 109-day conflict is an illegal war being waged without congressional approval.
Right.
Supporters of the resolution pointed out that it's cost 13 American service members their lives, drained over $30 billion in taxpayer money, and spiked gas prices for everyday families by an average of $450.
They argued the executive branch promised an end to the conflict but has only delivered shifting goalposts.
Exactly. But on the other side of the aisle, the counter-argument was that passing this resolution would pull the rug out from under American diplomats. Opponents argued that forcefully withdrawing troops right now would give tremendous aid and comfort to our enemy.
The argument was explicitly made that countries like China, Russia, and North Korea aren't stepping in to help Iran. So passing this resolution would make the Senate the only entity on the planet actively aiding the Iranian regime.
Right. They argued it would destroy the leverage needed to maintain a newly negotiated fragile truce. And obviously we aren't taking a side here, but it's a fundamental clash over who gets to steer the ship during an international crisis.
And this raises an important question about the structural design of our government. The Constitution intentionally splits war powers.
Oh, absolutely.
The executive commands the military, but the legislative branch declares war and controls the funding. So regardless of who is sitting in the Oval Office, we constantly see this friction.
Yeah, the White House always feels Congress is micromanaging global security.
Right, and Congress always feels the White House is overstepping its constitutional bounds. That tension is literally baked into the system by design.
And that 47 to 48 margin wasn't an isolated incident that Tuesday either. We saw another incredibly tight failed vote, 46 to 48 on SJR's 190.
The immigration appeals rule.
Right, an attempt to block a Justice Department rule limiting appellate procedures in immigration courts. But the real fireworks regarding the Justice Department happened over S4 4791.
The bill aimed at abolishing the so-called Anti-Weaponization Fund.
Yes.
The debate over that $1.8 billion fund is perhaps the purest distillation of current political gridlock.
It really is. So let's break down the two opposing narratives from the floor because, again, we're just reporting what was said. The left-wing argument for abolishing the fund is that it operates as a taxpayer-funded MAGA slush fund.
Right.
They argue the administration designed it specifically to reward perpetrators of the January 6th Capitol attack, offering what they called a sweetheart tax deal that provides political allies with lifetime immunity from IRS audits. So they tried to ban the fund permanently by law.
But passing a ban requires moving the bill, and that's where the right-wing argument halted the process entirely.
Because they see it completely differently.
Completely. Opponents of the ban argue the fund is absolutely necessary to compensate victims of what they term the Arctic frost operation. They argued the previous administration weaponized the DOJ to systematically target political opponents, allegedly subpoenaing the financial and phone records of over 400 individuals, including sitting U.S. senators and their staff, as well as prosecuting pro-life demonstrators in Tennessee.
Wow.
So they view blocking this fund as an active cover-up for government overreach.
Okay, so we have two totally different realities on the floor. But mechanically, how does a debate over one fund freeze the entire Senate?
It comes down to a mechanism called unanimous consent. So the Senate rules are notoriously clunky. If they did everything by the book, it would take weeks just to name a post office.
Right.
So for routine daily housekeeping, they use unanimous consent, basically asking, hey, does anyone object to us fast-forwarding through the rules to pass this? If everyone stays quiet, it passes instantly.
But if even one senator objects?
Exactly. One senator says, I object, and the fast-forward button breaks. You have to go back to the grueling, weeks-long process of cloture votes and debate time.
So when trust is fundamentally broken, when both sides are openly accusing the other of weaponizing the justice system to jail political opponents, nobody agrees to unanimous consent on anything.
Right. They dig in their heels, object to every minor procedural move, and the entire legislative machine just grinds to a halt.
Which brings us to the massive stack of newly introduced bills from Tuesday. Because here's where it gets really interesting. Behind the high-profile gridlock, lawmakers are constantly introducing highly specific legislation to tackle complex problems.
The lightning round.
Yes, let's look closely at a few of these bills to see the actual mechanics of what they're trying to achieve, organizing them by theme. Let's start with global security and the stance on China.
Okay, yeah.
There was the unanimous passage of S-Res 444, which condemned Xi Jinping for human rights abuses, espionage like the Equifax hack, and predatory lending.
And if you look at the broader legislative trend in the sources, there's a really unified push against foreign adversaries. It's not just one resolution.
Right, there were a bunch.
Yeah, like S-1502, supporting Uyghur rights, S-4009, targeting forced organ harvesting, S-2861, protecting the USMCA from harmful Chinese investments, and S-4259, building drone supply chains for Taiwan.
I even saw one S-3018 specifically allowing Taiwanese dignitaries to display their flag in the U.S.
Exactly. It's a highly mechanical approach to pushing back rather than just broad symbolic statements. Let's take that drone bill, S-4259, for example.
Right, building secure drone supply chains specifically for Taiwan's defense.
Yeah, because it's not just about selling weapons. It's recognizing that modern warfare relies on commercial components, batteries, microchips, rotors. If China controls the manufacturing of the raw components needed for surveillance drones, Taiwan can't defend itself, regardless of how many resolutions the U.S. Senate passes. This bill attempts to forcefully decouple that specific supply chain.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's pivot to theme 2, health, science, and community. I'm going to rattle off a few bills that hit closer to home.
Go for it.
We have S-1954, cutting red tape for biosimilar medications, S-1782, preventing organ transplant discrimination against people with disabilities, and S-4472, reauthorizing critical ALS therapy access.
And these bills represent the daily essential maintenance of the country. We also saw funding for early childhood education with the S-2819 Head Start Act and extending the Healthy Start Initiative with S-3799.
Oh, and there was even a bill, S-3733, allowing public libraries to process passport applications.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, just trying to make life easier for everyday citizens. But I want to go back to S-1954, the Biosimilar Red Tape Elimination Act, because the mechanics are incredibly wonky.
Yeah, the stated goal is lowering prescription drug costs, which, every politician promises.
Right, but the way this bill attempts it targets the FDA's interchangeability standards. For those of us who aren't pharmacists, biological drugs like insulin or Humira are incredibly complex to manufacture compared to simple chemical pills.
Wow.
Currently, even if a company makes a cheaper biosimilar version, the FDA requires massive, expensive secondary clinical trials before a pharmacist is legally allowed to substitute the cheaper version for the brand name original at the counter.
And those secondary trials cost millions of dollars and take years. So what S-1954 does mechanically is strip away that secondary requirement.
Meaning if the FDA approves the biosimilar as safe and effective, it is automatically deemed interchangeable.
Exactly. By tweaking a mundane bureaucratic rule at the FDA, the goal is to flood the market with cheaper alternatives instantly, breaking the monopoly of the brand-name drugs.
That is the kind of quiet, under-the-radar legislating that actually impacts your wallet. Now for our final theme, tech and the courts. We saw S-2799 attempting to repeal forced arbitration in employment disputes,
Very important one.
and S-2821, which attempts a massive overhaul of the H-1B tech worker visa program. Rather than just capping the number of visas, it targets the mechanics of the labor market. It requires employers to pay H-1B workers a minimum base salary of $150,000.
And the mechanism there is crucial. Because the historical criticism of the H-1B program is that massive tech companies use it to replace American workers with cheaper foreign labor.
Right.
So by artificially setting a high salary floor of $150,000, the bill forces companies to only use the visa for truly highly specialized top-tier talent, rather than undercutting median wages for entry-level coding jobs.
But wait, if they set the minimum salary at $150K, doesn't that just push companies to offshore those entry-level jobs entirely instead of bringing workers here?
Well, that is exactly the pushback you'd hear in a committee markup. It's a blunt instrument to fix a nuanced labor issue.
Oh, for sure.
And it shows how manipulating one lever in immigration law often triggers unintended economic consequences down the line.
It's all connected. So what does this all mean for you? Having an idea and passing a law are two entirely different realities in Washington, especially when you look at the looming deadlines on the calendar. During the morning business speeches, multiple senators sounded the alarm about October.
Right, the end of the fiscal year. Because Congress is legally obligated to pass 12 separate appropriations bills to fund different sectors of the government,
And when they can't agree,
which is standard operating procedure these days.
yeah, pretty much.
They rely on a mechanism called a continuing resolution, or a CR.
And a clean CR basically tells all federal agencies, just keep spending exactly what you spent last year, no new rules, no new programs. They usually pass one in October that lasts until Thanksgiving, panic at Thanksgiving, and pass another one until Christmas, and just keep kicking the can down the road.
But we need to explain what that actually means at the agency level.
Mm.
A clean CR doesn't just freeze the budget, it freezes progress. Agencies physically cannot allocate money for new directives.
There was a perfect example of this collateral damage mentioned on the floor. Expanding access to E15 ethanol for struggling farmers.
Yeah, that's a great example.
An initiative like that requires funding for new infrastructure at fuel terminals. But that local priority needs to hitch a ride on a moving legislative vehicle, like an agricultural appropriations bill.
Exactly. If the only vehicle moving through Congress is a clean, continuing resolution that legally forbids new spending programs, those local priorities just die on the vine.
Wow.
The Department of Agriculture cannot write the check, even if everyone agrees the farmers need the help. The agency's hands are totally tied by the CR.
And the political dynamics are only going to get more toxic as we approach the November elections. Both sides are going to prioritize political posturing over actual legislating.
Absolutely.
The incentive shifts toward using the threat of a government shutdown to highlight the supposed incompetence of the other party. But the collateral damage isn't just delayed ethanol subsidies. It's TSA agents working without paychecks, military families missing housing allowances, and, national parks locking their gates.
It's a sobering reality.
Oh.
When the system relies on unanimous consent and 60-vote cloture margins to function, extreme partisanship doesn't just make the debates louder, it physically breaks the machinery of government.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we wanted to do this deep dive today. We want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this special edition of Congress in Context.
Truly.
If you want to help keep this independent civic education resource sustainable, please consider using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the episode description. It allows us to keep digging through the congressional record without relying on corporate sponsors.
We genuinely appreciate the support, and we encourage you to take this information and run with it. Because you don't have to take our word for how these bills operate. Everything we discussed today is public record.
Yeah, completely public.
You can go to congress.gov and read the actual text of that H-1B visa overhaul or the housing reform package.
Look up the roll call votes on those tight 47 to 48 margins. See exactly where your specific representative stood when the pressure was on.
Use the site to track upcoming committee hearings on the bills we highlighted. Contact your local congressional offices to express your views on the DOJ funding or the foreign policy resolutions.
Let them know what you think.
Exactly. Because a healthy democracy requires citizen engagement that goes far beyond just casting a ballot every few years. It requires paying attention to what your government is doing the other 364 days of the year.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. We started today looking at a split screen. We saw that Congress is highly capable of coming together to pass massive 87-vote bipartisan reforms when the universal pain of an issue like housing forces them to the table.
You can order the pizza.
They can, but they are simultaneously paralyzed by bitter single-vote margins on foreign wars and the justice system, perfectly willing to let the machinery grind to a halt to score political points.
Right.
So as we hurtle toward a potential government shutdown this fall, ask yourself, when push comes to shove, will the overwhelming pressure of the upcoming election force our leaders to find that 60-vote compromise, or will they let the system freeze entirely? Keep a close eye on those continuing resolutions this October. That will be your answer.